Tim, my good friend here. We've been together for how long? We've been dating?
It's about 6 months, I think.
No,
there was a break in between. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think we met maybe a year and a half ago at one of our other young professional events, and our good friend over here, Craig Horn, with his beautiful South African accent, comes over to me and he says, "Hello, mate." "Hello, mate." He says, "I'd really like for you to get involved with Tim and do a mentorship." And me being me, never really having a mentor, I look at him and I said, "Sure, I'll mentor Tim. whatever you think." Now I'm so blessed that you introduced us, because Tim has really led me down this path and brought me here today and has allowed me to step out in my faith. So I want to say thank you first and foremost. Yeah. I want to start off with a little underhand pitch here, and I want you to briefly explain to us your career path and kind of give us a rundown of what life was like for Tim throughout your 20s, college, job, quickly, go through the stages here.
Okay, so I grew up in Houston, Texas, and went to school at Texas A&M and studied. I changed my degree a couple of times. I think I ended up with a marketing degree. Actually, I don't technically have it's a GED, basically, is what it is. So, and then went to school, my dad's a Presbyterian minister, and I thought I had faith. Now I look back and I don't really think it was a strong faith, but I prayed about things, but I don't know if I really listened well at the time. But ended up getting a job at Xerox selling copiers, and did that for 5 years, then went to business school at University of Texas, Austin, and then moved to New York, took a job as an analyst in New York City. And I think it was about a year into that when I had this moment where God made it very clear I had to work in comedy. And that freaked me out. I was really very uncomfortable about that. I mean, I knew I could make people laugh, but I just really did not want to put that expectation on myself. So I took a few years kind of exploring what I wanted God to tell me exactly what do you mean comedy? What am I supposed to be doing? And I find God doesn't always just make it that clear. You got to do a little homework on your own. So I tried stand-up. I wrote for some of the shows, the late-night shows. I did some commercials. I did improv. I went to improv. A friend of mine, this was the first move. I just started telling people. And I think this is a good idea. When God puts something on your heart, you tell friends who you trust and just see if they kind of confirm that with you and say, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like that's something God would say to you. And a buddy of mine said, oh, you should go to Upright Citizens Brigade. It's an improv theater in New York. So I go there, and Amy Poehler was my instructor. This is a couple years before she got on SNL. And so that was a great door. That was one of those things I look back on, I see this is something God put in my path. Because I remember I was probably 30 at the time, and anybody in comedy was probably 22, had gone to Harvard, in the Harvard Mafia, and I just didn't have any of those qualifications. And I was like, God, you don't understand how comedy works, God. And it turns out he does, as a matter of fact.
So it sounds like you took a lot of L's in the beginning. Is that true? But that being said...
Until tonight, Josh.
That being said, were you always funny? Like, did you grow up like the class clown? Did you make people laugh? Was there a moment in your life that it like clicked in your brain that was like, I enjoy making people laugh? Was that a thing for you? Or was God just like, be a comedian? Is that?
Yeah, that did happen. And probably around 7th grade, I think I started noticing, because I got in trouble a lot more in school. And I started noticing it then. But I was also very conscious about not wanting to have to work at it. I just wanted to sit in the back, and if something came to me, I'd make a smart aleck comment. And but yeah, I didn't. I still to this day I don't want to work at it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you're very good at it. So I did some research. We've been buddies for a while now, and I was like, I never really dug into your career as a comedian. So I typed you in on on Google, and obviously Tim Washer pops up, and he's got a full Wikipedia page. And I went through the deep web and found the videos.
Okay, wait, I was acquitted of those charges. I just want to be clear. My pastor's in this room, so.
So did you do an Office version for IBM? Is that what I saw?
That's right. That's right.
How deep did I have to go to get to that? Because it was
Yeah, that was a dark web, exactly. You should, you get rid of those computers. You should get them out of the house. Yeah.
How did that work out?
That was one of these things. I was at IBM and I had just gotten there. I realized I was trying to make it in comedy, and I was doors had started open. I was doing stuff on Conan, on The Late Show with Letterman, but I wasn't coming close to paying bills. And then our daughter Katie was born, and it was a surprise, which is weird because she's adopted. We should have seen that coming, but it happened a lot faster than we thought. So, I was married at the time, and my wife was like, "Dude, you got to go get a dental plan, get a job." And so I got on at IBM. I thought, I got this background. I got some business background. If I can get a job working like in an events company where I could maybe MC some events or write jokes for executives giving speeches.
Which you did very well, because I saw some of those videos as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you did. Good job.
Thank you, man. So I ended up getting this job at IBM, and look, this was a lesson to me. A buddy of mine called me. I got a part-time gig writing for the CMO at Pepsi, some comedy for his speeches. And I was behind on the deadline, as I usually am. And a buddy of mine calls me. He says, "Hey, can I talk to you? I want to get in this business that you're doing. Would you mind meeting me at Starbucks?" And I was thinking, man, I just don't have time. I was panicked. But I thought, I need to go see this guy. He's been a good friend. And so I take the time out to go meet with him. And while we're talking, I tell him what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. And he's like, "Oh, IBM has an opening." And so if I hadn't met with Roger and there's this principle in improv that says support your partner. And the idea is if we're in a scene together, that my intention needs to be about making you look good, okay? And that's easy to do, by the way. So he's a handsome man. I don't know if you guys have noticed. Don't patronize me, Horn. So, but once you put your I love it because there are a lot of similarities with improv, I think, and Christianity. One is surrender, this idea of surrendering. You do that, you walk out on stage and you discover what's there for you. And it's so, to me, I think that's so much about, that's what we have to do as Christians, is we surrender and see what God has in store for us. But I was supporting my partner in a sense, in showing up and helping Roger out. And what happened is Roger led me to this job at IBM. And I go in there, but I think, okay, well, God wants me to take this job. Oh, let me share. Can I share another point here on the side? This is when I learned what temptation looked like for me. I was interviewing for a job, and I had these two offers to do sales, which I could do in my sleep. That's what I did at Xerox. And I would make a lot of money and work maybe 20 hours a week and get it done and just do really well. And I thought this would be easy, and I can do comedy on the side because I'll have time for it. Now, the IBM job was a speechwriter job, which I didn't have any experience in, really, except for this Pepsi gig was the first time I'd ever done a job there. But I just had this joy that I couldn't explain when I went into the interview at IBM. And I just knew God was saying, this is where I want you. But the easy road, I knew I'd make money. I knew it'd be easy. And I thought, well, I'll be able to do comedy if I go this easy route. And I just knew God was saying, go this way. So it didn't make any sense on paper, but I took the job at IBM. And I thought that was going to be the death of my comedy career, going to work at IBM.
Was IBM before SNL, Conan O'Brien, things of that nature? Or did you do those simultaneously, or did you work into that?
SNL happened before,
okay.
And The Late Show happened before IBM.
Okay.
And Conan came after.
So when you, so there's a video of Tim on SNL, and he's sitting next to John Oliver, Bill Nye the Science Guy, and Tina Fey. Like, was that like, you know, I made it to the big leagues, like my first big league at bat? Was that like, I did it? Did you feel that way? Or was it like, I need more? Or was it like, this scares me? Or how did that affect you?
Working with those people, it was all, is that what you mean?
I mean, working with those people, but also being on that stage of like, that's a big deal. You know, that's like.
Yeah, but here's the thing. By that point, I knew that I had nothing to do with getting there. Okay. By that point, I understood God was opening these doors. And I had also understood the first couple of doors that he opened for me, I would walk through, but with total fear. And I'm talking about fear where I would almost walk away. This was like, so Brian's sermon, I think a week ago, there's peacemakers and conflict, and he talked about the avoider. And that's man, I identify with that. I would avoid these things, and particularly if I thought I wasn't qualified for something, I'd find a reason to get out of there. And that's a lesson that God's taught me. If something comes to me, an opportunity comes my way, and I'm afraid to take it, if I sense that fear, then I'll look at that and I'll think, why am I afraid? You know, is the fear because I'm not qualified? If that's the case, then I don't question it. I just go through that door, because God's taught me. If the fear is like, well, you know, I'm camping and there's a bear outside, that's a different kind of fear. You know, I stay inside and pray. But that's one thing that there was a story in the Bible that just really resonated with me in this process. In Judges 6. The story of Gideon, where God says, listen, I want you to go fight the Midianites, 135,000 people. You know, you only have 30,000, but we're going to do it with 300. And Gideon's like, you got the weakest, you don't understand who I am. I'm the weakest of my clan.
But it meant so much more when he won, because it was like, you didn't win with this vast army, you won with 300 men. And you won because you had me on your side.
Yes.
Right.
Amen. That's exactly right. And that's, come on now. Once that happens to you a couple of times, you realize, okay, God is with me. You know, God, because I love it. In Judges 6, verse 14, Gideon's arguing with God, saying, you got the wrong guy. And God says, have I not called you? And that's all you need to know. If God's called you, then you just go. You just show up and you see what he does.
So, at one point in your career, did you feel like you were at your peak, or have you not gotten there yet? Or do you feel like you're still, you know, going to reach a pinnacle of success, that you're still striving? Yeah,
the thing that I've learned is that anything good that comes out of me, it comes from God. It's all God's work, and I have learned that God's always going to bring something better every time. And actually, a mentor of mine, Johnny D. John D. Pasquale, Adam's father. Sometimes when I'll get nervous or anxious about a project that I have coming up, he set me down. He said, listen, man, you need to pray. God wants to partner in this business with you. He wants to be part of the comedy business with you. And you need to just invite him into that. And so I'm getting better at that. I'm getting better at just, taking a deep breath, and I actually get down on my knees at home. And there was a time not too long ago when I fell away from my faith, and I couldn't, after a divorce, I couldn't pray. I wouldn't bring myself to pray. So when I moved out of my home and moved into a townhome, I bought a pew. It's like a 150-year-old pew from an old church, just as a little visual reminder to go get down on my knees and pray. And so now that works for my first 20. I'll come in and I'll get down and just try to turn the morning over to God and go from there.
So, you were definitely in show business. There's no question about it. There's, SNL, Conan O'Brien, commercials, Budweiser, IO Cablevision, which is probably my favorite commercial that you did. What was being a Christian like in the, I don't want to say Hollywood scene, but it's kind of Hollywood. And in my opinion, it's the vibe Hollywood gives off is not pro-Christian.
Oh.
So how did you deal with that? Was it was it more like you just, didn't say anything, or did you, how was that?
Well, I did meet some other wonderful Christians in the business. Do you guys know who Tony Hale is? I got to meet some of those guys, and they taught me that, being a Christian in Hollywood, what it is, you're the first one in the room, you're the last one to leave, and you clean up after everybody. You clean up the place, and that's how you preach. You're not talking about Jesus. You're being there. You're being responsible, and you work harder than everybody else. And I followed that, and I can't. What my biggest fear is I would get an amazing script that I was excited to do, and it would call me to say the Lord's name in vain. I was afraid of that, and fortunately that never was an issue. There was one time. One time I do commercial auditions, and that can pay the bills. And so I put in there all these things that I won't audition for. I won't do tobacco or alcohol or gambling and or pharmaceuticals. And that's really just because I don't want to be embarrassed by doing like a irritable bowel syndrome commercial. It's not holy, okay? But my agent called me and they sent me on this audition, and it was for KY jelly.
Oh.
All right, and I was married at the time. And so in the audition, the first round of auditions, you're alone. You're in there with the casting director, and they have a video. They just record it. But on the call back, I would have had to go back, and I would have been on a set, in a bed with a woman, and I just felt uncomfortable about that. So I threw the audition. I did a terrible job on it, and just, that's how I dealt with that, because I thought that's probably not a good idea. Yeah. But there was never, I think the darkest place for me was doing stand-up comedy in New York City clubs. That was just just a gross place. Because when you're starting off with other comedians who are not good, and they just rely heavily on profanity and telling jokes about off-color topics, and it's not a fun place to be.
My father always said that a good comedian is a clean comedian. If you like, Jerry Seinfeld is a pretty clean comedian. Yeah. And I love his show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which is kind of where we got the name for this. And in that show, he kind of comes up with this, I forget who he's talking to, but he says something along the lines of, you cannot deny the laugh. If you're auditioning for a part, a director could say, you're not very good, or you don't fit the part. But if you can make a room laugh, that's like, you can't deny that. They can't tell you you're not good because I was there, I heard the laugh. And obviously there are times where there is no laugh. And I have a buddy that's a comedian, and he actually loves the bomb. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy that?
No.
Was it? Okay.
No, not at all. No, I did not enjoy the bomb. I hated the bomb.
Did you work out of the bomb?
Yes. And probably my biggest bomb, the first time I ever did stand-up, it was at a club on 78th and Broadway called Stand Up Broadway. And I get in there, and I was just too green to know that you're supposed to write a set list. So you get just a little index card, and you write down 4 or 5 words, 6 words that just clue you on what your next bit's going to be. Postman, dog, Halloween costume, whatever. But I didn't know that. So I memorized everything, and I get up on stage, and I get like halfway through it, and I completely forget where I am. I totally forgot the bit. But what I did is started joking with the audience about that. And that was actually much better than the rest of my performance. It's just improvising with them. And I was married at the time, and my wife, I know, she just is so embarrassed. And so I should have seen it coming then. I should have known right then. But I did not like the bomb. But look, something about there's a story I want to share real quickly about not denying the laugh. I remember auditioning. I had been on like 7 auditions, commercial auditions, and it's humiliating. It really is humiliating. For me, it was so humiliating to go on these commercial auditions, and I just felt so lousy after each one. And I called a buddy of mine from this group of Christians I was talking about earlier, a guy named Todd Wilkerson. He used to play, you remember the Burger King guy, the guy with the big crown? Todd's always the guy inside of that. He's a really funny guy. And I said, look, I think God's saying, look, TV commercials aren't going to work for you because it just is so, it should not be feeling this horrible. And he said, how many have you been on? I said, 7. He said, that's really not enough to tell. And he said, who's sending you in on this audition? I told him the agent's name. He said, okay, well, if it's Stacey Abrams, then yeah, you should go on this audition. Because I was thinking about blowing it off altogether. I went in there and I'm sitting around in the waiting room for this audition. Again, I'm behind on another writing project, just thinking, what in the world am I doing here? And I'm listening to all these guys who are competing with me. And they're talking about all the classes they've been taking and the commercials that they've been in and the shows they're doing on Broadway and all this stuff. And I'll never forget the lie that came into my mind. You have no business being here. That's the thought that came into my mind. And I remember looking down at my backpack and I was thinking about, I should probably just let me get my backpack and leave. You know, that's going to be better for everybody. And that's when I remember the story of Gideon. I had heard the sermon just like 3 days earlier, you know, at church. And I thought, okay, all right, look, God qualifies the called. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I thought, all right, God, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm surrendering. I'm giving this up. I'm going to go in and do one more commercial. And no matter what happens, I'm done. So I right when I think that, I'm like, okay, I prayed that release, I surrendered, and I felt at peace. And then they called my name. My name was, I was next, and the guy comes out and he says, Ted. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't even get my name right. You know, it was really, I remember thinking, really, God? I mean, do you really need to do this and embarrass me like this? And so I didn't say anything. I just sat there. And I would just wait like 30 seconds, and the guy says, Ted Washer. And I'm like, okay, now I have to go. So I get up, and I walk into the room, and this is the callback. So the whole agency's there. You know, there are like 6 people in there. And the film director's there, and he sees that I'm crushed by this, and he's trying to help me out and lift me up. And he said, well, maybe we call you Ted. And I said, well, I prefer Theodore. And everybody busted up laughing. And right then I knew that, God had gone before me. And I'll never forget in that moment, I thought, this is what David must have felt like when he went down and got the stones. He was like, dude, he wasn't worried about who the giant was. All he knew was that God's with him. And he's like, you know, let's do this. And for the first time, I understood how this little shepherd boy could go on and take on a giant. Because it's not about being brave. It's about just knowing God's with me.
Yeah, he's got your back.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're a hard worker. I mean, we can all here see that you're a hard worker when it comes to, you know, practicing your stand-up, going on the auditions, just working, right? My father always tells me, you know, you should work like nobody today so you could live like nobody tomorrow. Now, what are the things that you did throughout your career that got you to where you are today? And then there was one other thing here. Let's go with that.
Well, that is, so I certainly don't see myself in that light.
As a hard worker?
Not at all. No, and I almost didn't come to this thing. You know, I'm not going to.
But you obviously had to get up every day and go to work.
It does say that. And I try to, but it's a struggle for me often. And I talked to, not too long ago, I talked to Greg Dietrich. Have you guys, he's preached here on occasion. He's good friends with Brian. And I had a really nice conversation with him about this, about just the shame I feel all the time because I feel like the parable that I always thought God was giving me incorrectly is the parable of the talents, you know, where the farmer gives these 3 servants, you know, money to invest, and then one guy goes and he buries it. And the farmer comes back and says, you wicked and slothful servant. And I always thought those are God's words for me. And boy, you talk about struggling with shame. And I finally realized, no. It's the prodigal son is my story. You know, when I finally came home, you know, and said, listen, can I just eat with the pigs? You know, God came running. So, but I struggled with that for so long, and I still struggle thinking I'm not doing enough. You know, I'm letting my fear get in the way.
I mean, we speak about that all the time.
Yeah, we do.
Not doing enough. And for myself, I'm extremely blessed. And, you know, I always feel like we should be doing more or trying to do more. What do you think about that?
Well, this is what Greg, here's the answer. This is what Greg Dietrich told me. He said, listen, you know, step one is just be who God has made you to be. Just be yourself and see what comes from that.
This is where the mentor comes in. You know, this is the conversation we have as a mentor and a mentee, where I just, you know, throw it at you and you give the wisdom.
That's right. And all that wisdom usually comes from Brian and Craig. It's stuff I've stolen from these knuckleheads and passing it along. But I remember when Greg told me that, it was so freeing. It was so freeing to me. And he said, look, the devil works at you that way. He'll put those lies in front of you all the time, saying you're not doing enough, and then that shame comes in, and then you get sidelined. And that's happened to me all through my life. And there's just some peace about that when you say, all right, let me just stop and let me be who God has made me to be. Let me just be this person and see what comes of it. And that's really helped me, just to sit down and have peace with it and think, okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. Let me just write and see what God does.
I feel like a lot of young adults who stray from the church are feeling that way. You know, maybe they're not, you know, the perfect, they don't know the Bible. I mean, I can't spit verses from the Bible, but I'm still here, I'm still trying. And I feel like that's very important for the young adults that are coming up or coming out of college. That even though you're not the perfect Christian, it's still our duty to keep it in our mind that we need to work at this. Now, going into another segment, it's often thought about that failure is a catalyst for success. Are there any failures that you remember that really changed you or pushed you forward in a big way?
Oh man, I remember there are a lot of failures, absolutely, but I don't know if they've necessarily pushed me forward. Because I'll get, what happens to me is a failure.
You're killing my questions here.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just give me.
And I gave you these before.
You did.
You should have told me this.
That's right, but I thought you said this was going to be multiple choice. C. I brought like a Scantron. I thought I had this thing aced.
Number 2 pencil?
Yeah, and a number 2 pencil. Failure is really hard for me to pick myself up and move forward on, because I still struggle with getting caught up with the shame, and I'm trying. I've made progress on that. I've made progress and I tried. You know, being a dad has helped me with this, because my kids, what we'll do is I'll take them out instead of we don't celebrate good grades. I mean, we'll do that on occasion, but we don't celebrate it. It's not a big deal. I'll congratulate them. We celebrate failure. So if they try something and it doesn't go their way, then we're going out to eat. That's awesome. And because I want them to be conditioned that, you know, that was the win. The win was going up and trying, getting up and going to the blackboard. And that's helped me try to perform in the same way. Try to say, look, let me just get up and give it a shot and see what happens. But I'm still working at that. Right.
I know for me, I played a lot of baseball as a kid. And if anybody played baseball in this room, they know that that's like the ultimate failure sport. You know, if you fail 3 out of 10, or no, what is it? Yeah, 7 out of 10 times, you're an amazing, you're a Hall of Famer. So like playing baseball growing up, you know, we had this saying, hit the reset. And it was our assistant coach, he told you hit the reset button. And you'd have to, you know, it was on your belt or on your tap of your cap. He let you pick what your reset button was. And, you know, you struck out, you brush yourself off, and you go back out there and continue to play the game. And for me, that sport was so big for my character. You know, and we won a lot. Like, we won a state championship. I was captain of the team. Like, it was a great career for me and throughout high school. But like, it was failure. And I think when you get used to failure, it doesn't hurt as much. And I really want young adults to understand that just because you fail doesn't mean it's game over. And if you have kids, make them play baseball,
That's right. Look, the one story that I did have in mind about this was when I'd been at IBM, and this is all from God, I had a pretty good track record of doing these videos, and they'd gotten a lot of press and awards, and again, it was all from God. God wrote all the scripts. I went to Cisco. I went to Cisco, and just the first project I did there, I pitched this idea, and it blew up in my face. I mean, it blew up, man. There was so much hate online. It was amazing. And I had thought, wow, I thought I had built a career here, and thought I had become someone who was successful, but that's wrong. The most press I've made was about failing in this thing. So, and we went, man, I was so depressed. And we went on a family vacation. Then we went to Estes Park, Colorado, and I go there, and two things happened to me. One, there is the Stanley Hotel. Any relation? Is that your place? So it's one of these famous hotels that was built in like 1909 by the Stanley steamer guys, the guys who had the Stanley car, and A.O. Stanley. Stephen King, back in, so 80 years later, cut to 80 years later, Stephen King's driving through, and he had just written The Shining. He shared his first draft of The Shining with a bunch of friends, and they said, dude, this is the worst thing you have ever written. This is the dumbest thing. So I
think that's why I did well.
Well, yeah. What happened is, so he goes and he sees the hotel. They drive through, and it's dilapidated. It's in between owners. It's run down. And he's like, I want to stay there. They pull in. It's October 29th, and the end of the season, because it gets so cold there. And so it was the last night of the season. The hotel was completely empty, and they said, okay, we can stay in the presidential suite, room 217. He goes up there. He ends up at that hotel because he's fleeing this failure, and he gets up, can't sleep, gets up, walks around the hotel. He's haunted by this ghost. He wakes up the next morning. He goes outside, and as he tells the story, I smoked a cigarette, and by the end of the first cigarette, I had the bones of the new book firmly in mind. And that made me think, okay, you know what? Going on the ghost tour there at the Stanley Hotel and hearing that story about King, it made me understand, you know what? Failure is a necessary part of the creative process. And I end up going to Hyde Chapel there at the YMCA camp at Estes Park on Sunday. And the pastor's preaching this beautiful sermon on Peter. And he talks about how Peter failed more than anyone in the Bible, and that's what he did. He tried, but man, he failed spectacularly. And the pastor tells this story about this research project that they did. And this is really good, I think, for young adults especially to think about. These professors at college, they said, listen, they took a group of students and they said, we're gonna split you in half, all right? And we want this half of the room, you're gonna make pottery. This is a pottery experiment, okay? And you guys, we're gonna judge you on the best craft, the best pot that you make. So get to work, go out and create you guys work together, and you got an hour. Then they go over to this half, and they said, listen, we want you to make pottery, and here's how we're going to judge you. We're going to judge you by weight. So we're at the end of this, we're going to weigh the pots that you make, and whoever wins, whoever has created more tonnage wins the contest. So these people, instead of theorizing and planning and working and coming up with all this, they just started going. They just started making pots. They didn't care what they looked like, and just churning them out. And by the end of it, these guys had so much experience making pots, and after the hour, they had one that looked so much better than the crew over here who spent all this time trying to get it perfect. And this was in the sermon that this preacher was sharing, and it just a nice reminder of like, God he's not looking for perfection. He just wants us to get out of the boat, like Peter did, and just keep trying, and he'll work. So whenever, this is the other side of yes story for me. Whenever you get called to do something, no matter how much it scares you, you just say yes to it. And that book, if you haven't read that book, Brian's book is so encouraging because you see all these people go through this experience where they are afraid to do it, and they just say yes, and God shows up.
Paid advertisement.
That's right. He's doing a book signing here at the end, is that right?
What's the best work advice you've ever been given?
Oh man, to get there early before the donuts are gone. That's probably key. Let me think. I had a note on this one too, and I forgot. Oh, it's write stuff down so you don't forget. That was it. But I'll tell you this. I think today. I don't know if this is advice or not, but we all have to. Everybody needs. You always need to be building your network, and one of the best ways to do that is through social media, using that smartly, and writing. You got to write every day. That's the best advice, is write every day. And even if it's just a short post for like LinkedIn or Instagram, just put up a photo. Like you just got back from North Carolina, you post a photo of your trip, a couple of stops, and you just tell a short story about it. Or it could even be a caption, it could be 20 words. But let people know that you're out there doing things. And it doesn't have to be too much, just a photo. Like coming here tonight, post a photo about, hey, we went to this thing. And, people just see that you're out and you're active and you're going and you're meeting other people. But writing and learning to writing is so important. The thing is, if you can communicate well, if you're the best communicator at the company, you can write your own ticket. You can write your own ticket.
Would you change anything about your career path?
You know what? I would have lived on campus in undergrad. That's one thing I'd do. I would have loved, had I known I was going to go this direction, I would have got a liberal arts degree, and I would have started in comedy. But the thing is, and I remember also having these discussions with God. It's like, why are you telling me when I'm 30 years old? And because that's old in the comedy business if you're going to be on SNL and that kind of thing. And I remember being frustrated. Why are you late to this? And of course, the answer is God wasn't late. I had this experience that I learned in business that now I can bring some healing to in the business community. So I guess I'm tempted to say I would have liked to start earlier, but this is how God's plan worked out. So I wouldn't change that.
And you're here today.
I'm here today.
Advice for a young adult who just graduated college, or a high school student who is thinking about if college is for them, either or. Okay,
so for my daughter Katie, we had brunch at the mothership. What was that? 2 weeks ago, I think. And met Olivia. Yeah. Yes. So she is graduating this May from high school. So the advice I'd give her is to take a gap year or 2 or 3 so I can raise enough money to pay her to send her to school. I think gap years. She brought up this question the other day about gap years, and I think that's a smart thing to do. If it's right for you and you think you'll get back to it, for sure. And I think just getting the real world experience and going to work, you learn so much from that.
Yeah, and to that point, I went to college with the idea that I was going to work for the family business. I from 10 years old, I was going to work for the family business. So I went to college with that in mind and had a notebook, and it said American Pavement Ideas, and I'd write stuff down, and I did college. And then when I graduated, I thought I was going to change the company, and I started, telling my dad, oh, we should do this or we should do that. And he was like, grab a shovel, And I really wish I would have taken that gap year because, I learned so much from working that I could have went back and really said, listen, I don't need this, I don't need that. This is important, this is important. And maybe I wouldn't even gotten the degree. Maybe I just would have went and take the class. I spent 4 years working my butt off to get this degree, when really I only needed about 5 of those classes.
Yeah.
So if you tell your daughter that. I think I told her that.
You did tell her that?
Yeah.
Could you tell her again?
Yeah.
That'd be good.
We're making a video.
Just take 5 classes.
Just take 5 classes.
Stay here, live at home with your dad. That'd be good.
Yep. Get your own bathroom, mom cook dinner. Yeah.
Well, it's something that's also inside that. Grab a shovel. Humility is important. Yeah. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, I think the best part about my career is that he started us, on a broom. And then, if I was to enter into the family business and he said, you're going to be a manager, I don't think I would have had the same respect for, my coworkers as if, now that I do now, because I started on the broom, you went to a shovel, now you're operating equipment, and now I'm bidding work and, running job sites. And I think for me, one of the biggest compliments I ever got was my father's first employee, 25-year employee, comes over my house. He was actually my neighbor. And he comes over, stops by with a 6-pack, and we're just having a beer on the porch. And he says to me, I'll work for you. I'll work for you. Like you do things right. And like for me, that was like the best, compliment that I could get, because here's a kid, 24 years old at the time, and I'm a boss to a 50-year-old man. But they respected me. So like it was that foundation, and I'm happy that happened.
Well, I think that's one of the skills you have is a leader is honor. Brian talked about that when he was here in November at this meeting about humility, but then also the importance of honor. And I think, gosh, that's so important, and we really miss that today. We don't have too much of that today. And I think when people sense that, they can sense that about you, and they can sense that you will respect them, you'll honor them, and that's very attractive. People will follow that.
Well, thank you. So we're going to do a rapid fire round.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have ever watched Center Stage, but they do a rapid fire round. First job. And I think you told us that already.
Very
first paying job.
The very first paying job was Baskin Robbins. Yes, that's right.
How many flavors then?
We had 31 flavors. The guy who owned the franchise had this big hairy chest, and he buttoned his shirt down to here, and he'd always lean over, and there'd be gray hair in the sherbet. So I probably shouldn't have said that. So I fear I've said too much.
First car.
First car. It was a Volare. It was my grandmother's. I remember I got a call at high school.
A Ferrari or?
No, a Volare.
Volare.
It's like a Plymouth sedan. They haven't made them in like 300 years. And I'll never forget. My mom said, "Do you want Grandma's car?" And I had to think about it. I said, "Let me get back to you on this." I had to think about it. And it had a bumper sticker on the back that said, "On the 7th day, God created clowns." And my friends called it the Babe. So, yeah.
Color?
It was like a really ugly yellow beige. It was pretty bad. Yeah, I didn't have any dates in high school, and I like to think that's why.
Favorite song and artist? Or either or.
You know what I've been listening to over and over is Ready or Not by Hillsong. That's so good. I just found that about a week ago. And that's so good. And the lyrics are just so amazing. Ready or Not. Check that out by Hillsong.
By Hillsong. Favorite sports team?
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
Hero.
Hero?
Who's your hero?
A hero?
Not like action figure hero, but like...
Yeah.
I mean, you could do both if you want. Who's your favorite action figure hero?
Well, Peter. Do they have a little action figure where he like comes out of the boat and it sinks?
I don't do that.
I like Peter a lot. I like Peter because he failed so much. But he kept trying to get out of the boat, and that's what I'm trying to do.
All right, so Biggie or Tupac?
Oh, wow. Man, how about Mark Twain? I'm not a. That's rap, or is that all hip hop, or what?
I think it's
Something in between, kind of a combination.
Yeah.
All right,
Right?
George
Right.
Frederick Handel. How about that?
Favorite Bible verse or story? And you've said a few. But
I say Gideon. Gideon is this in Judges 6:14. Have I not called you? That's definitely one of them. Yeah. And then, well done, my good and faithful servant. That would be a nice one to go out on for sure.
Where do you see Tim in 5 years?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I tell you, probably the only thing I know is I'll be close to this church. This church has saved me. You know, I walked away from my faith after a divorce, and I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. And April 15th, 2 years ago, I wake up. I was going to go to the gym on Sunday, and God said, hey, go to Walnut Hill. And Brian Mowry's up there preaching, and it's like a stand-up show, man. It's just, he's killing it. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is for me. And the Holy Spirit just, I saw friends from my first church in Connecticut, like back in 1998. Just the Rudnicki's, and I just saw all these people, and I was like, God was like, man, this is your place. Yeah. So it'll be, that's the only thing I know is 5 years, I'll still be around here.
10 years? Or
10 years, we'll see.
Maybe
What's your career? Are you going to still be here?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting back to Texas, but I do, when you find, it's so rare to find a place that's fulfilling. And especially when you have people like this, where you can go and, man, if you guys haven't taken time to get out and meet people and sit down and have, man, I'm always just, I walk out of the times when we have breakfast just lifted up when we sit down and have, because we have, sometimes we'll just talk about nonsense, but it's still this, we have this, connection of Jesus that's always there. And, I always learn something. You like just the little thing about listening to scripture on the iPhone that you pointed out to me. It's a little thing. It's just, if you find a place where you're being fed, not just through, not just through the services, but also just through people, explore that and get to know people more. And man, the people here, it's really hard for me to fathom how many amazing people we have access to at this church.
Is a huge network.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we want to establish here at this this event is a network of young adults that have a faith background, or if you're looking for a faith background, this is the place where we want you to gather. And last question, most proud moment.
Oh, wow. You know what? It would probably be, I'd have to, I don't know, it was probably doing that filibuster commercial that you mentioned. I think you mentioned it. I don't know. But the one where I went in there and I was afraid to go in, and they said Ted and Theodore and that kind of thing. And it's not really, I don't know if it's pride. It's more of seeing that the pride that I have is being willing to get out of the boat. That time I was finally willing to step forward and go in instead of running out of that audition room, which I almost did. I went in there and I saw what God did there. So, and then from there, when they called me and said, you got the commercial, and I'm like, oh my gosh, now what? I can't do a commercial. But God was with me. We went up and we shot it in Toronto, and it was a non-union gig, and it's so funny. I was like, I can't remember lines, and I can't do any of this, and it's for I'm playing a senator in a filibuster, and they said, well, you don't have lines, just read these. You just get up there and just start naming commercials, naming channels.
But I think you had note cards in your hand, no?
I did, yeah. I held on to, because I was doing a filibuster, I could hold on to, I had pages, but all I had to do was just say ESPN, and that's all I had to do. You didn't have to remember lines, and it's just so funny how. The other thing about that is
my favorite part was the delivery of the HBO.
The HBO Latino. They probably couldn't use that anymore now, but it's just funny how it's, I have this huge win, meaning that God led me here and opened this commercial up, and I got the commercial, and immediately go back to fear, thinking I can't do this, and just forgot what God just did 2 minutes earlier, and thought, and he just walked me through everything. So And that won an industry award. And here's the interesting thing. So I was non-union at the time. I wasn't, which means you're doing like a muffler commercial for the guy down the street when you're non-union. So that was another reason I thought about not doing commercials, because it's like a waste of time. I'm not going to get any exposure, like I know the business. But what happened is this was for a cable company, Cablevision at the time. So they get media for free. So they ended up running this thing all day long in the tri-state area. They just ran it all the time. And so all the people, that's how I got on Conan. They saw that commercial and they were like, well, who is this knucklehead? And that's how I got on it, And it's funny how you just think, no, look, these are the reasons I can't do it, God. You don't understand. Like, this is how comedy works, And then God just flips it on his head and says, look, have I not called you?
So right now we're going to open up to questions. Anybody in the audience? Over here first.
I remember a few amazing things that you all said about standing up to fear despite doubt. I also noticed one thing that you both also agreed upon, which is that this silent time in the middle of your pitch up on stage is a part of the job you did not enjoy. I'm curious because I remember reading and then testing the effects of tension on moving people. And I remember verses in the scripture in Proverbs saying that a righteous man who stands his ground is better than the shouts of a ruler of people who are not wise. I gotta censor it for the camera. So, something that I've noticed, I'm not sure if you all ever noticed it when you were on stage, but if you remember a time when you were on stage and you told a joke, or you were anywhere and you said something, and then you just let it sit there, while everybody else just kind of like, maybe they're looking to the sides, maybe it's in a boardroom looking to see who would laugh first, or if anyone would laugh, or what the boss would do. And then suddenly, did you ever experience this where just after a while, just nothing, then something?
Man, Joseph, you don't bring the easy questions, do you? That's a tough one, man. That's hardball. Let me do it now. I'm just going to be quiet for 15 minutes here. I don't like Ricky Gervais, if you go back and look at the BBC's Office, he uses that quite a bit. He loves to make people feel uncomfortable. And I have this, one of the things I'm working on, I've been to some CR meetings to try to help the people-pleasing part of me. It doesn't let me make people feel uncomfortable intentionally. It doesn't work that way. So now I do understand tension. Tension, you have to have tension for a payoff for a joke. Otherwise, the punchline won't work if you don't build tension. So I do know how to build tension, and I'll use silence in some occasion. But I don't like going too far to where I make people feel uncomfortable, because the people pleaser in me just, it doesn't work that way.
I gotcha. Oh, this over here first.
Yes.
So you talked a bit about failure, and I was curious about when you were, or when you ever are going to be in the midst of a failure and you're feeling complete, like you're in the midst of it, you don't have the hindsight to look back and what you learned from it, and you're completely unmotivated at the end of your road, just so depressed. How do you even start to pick up those pieces?
Oh gosh, man, my stomach is just, it knots right now. I pray. This happened yesterday, okay? Yesterday morning. And I prayed and just asked God for help. And I sometimes I know I just need to try to do my best to be at peace with it. I try to read scripture, or I'll listen to a sermon. But yesterday I prayed, and because I was in a tough place. And I was supposed to have lunch with Brian today. And after I pray, I get this text from him, said, "Hey, could you meet today instead?" And I was like, oh my gosh. Thank you, Jesus. And God doesn't always work that way. He'll sometimes in the waiting, like, what's that, chapter 4, say yes to a season of waiting. Is it 4? No. What do you know? The go-kart story. Sometimes it's important to wait and to kind of endure that sadness. And so I know that logically, but it's really hard to go through sometimes. But that's what I do. I pray and I'll ask God. I always ask him for comfort. But what's more important than comfort, is to show me what he wants me to learn in this. So, I'm trying to get to the point. I'm getting better at not asking for comfort and just saying, show me what you want me to learn. But there are times when I just get so desperate and I need to feel, because it's hard. For all of us, the isolation's been tough for everybody. And I have my kids with me half the week, and then they're at their mom's half the week. So it's a blessing, and actually it's just a blessing not to have them all the time. I'm kidding. So, but there are times when it's really low. And Josh, I remember you brought this up. You asked me how that was, and I appreciate the compassion. I really was surprised. This is before Olivia was born. I was surprised that you had that compassion, like we're able to see, like, oh, man, I wonder what it's like being all alone in your house for, half the week. I appreciate that. Anyway, prayer, look, it doesn't always feel like an answer for me, but that's what I do. And I'm learning more. He's showing me more. And sometimes I'll reach out. I'm getting better at reaching out to people and saying, hey, can we get together for breakfast? Mm. And I don't have to talk about it. I don't need to necessarily talk about the problem. I just need to be around somebody, and like we'll get together and just laugh. And sometimes I'll go into it, sometimes I won't. But it's just being with people and knowing that you have somebody to call. That helps.
Brian?
We live in a world today that's very offended. Can you tell us a time where you offended someone and how that turned out for you?
That hasn't happened. Brian, I remember starting off in comedy, and that's what I thought. That's what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I don't offend anybody, which is such a dumb thing, because you won't say anything. You'll never say anything. And sure, let me think about that. I know anytime I go into a room, somebody's going to get offended about something. And part of it, it's not because you've said anything wrong necessarily, but you never know. Somebody's cousin would, maybe lost their job yesterday, and you made a joke about something like that. You just never know who's in the room. You never know what pain they've been through, and what they're suffering with that day. So it's going to happen. So I've gotten to a point where I don't worry about that. Of course, I'm mindful about what I do, and I'm careful not to call out a group or anything like that. Not just call out a group, but make sure what I say cannot be misinterpreted. President Taft wrote. He said, "Don't write so people understand. Don't write to." I forget what he said. It's not interesting. He said, "Don't write to be understood. Write so you can't be misunderstood. Have that level of clarity." Of course, that said, you're still going to upset some people for sure. But what I do now is, I'll write a set, and then I give it up to the Lord. I just say, God, this is what I think you want me to say. And I almost always try to remember to pray, God, guard my tongue. Guard my tongue and stop me. And he's done that. He's done that. Oh my gosh. I had a corporate gig one time. This is in the early days. And there was a joke about, I really don't want to say what it is now. But I found out after, I forgot this joke. I forgot to say it. And it was one of my favorite jokes. And I found out afterwards that somebody had gone through this problem. And I realized, oh my gosh, had I said that, this could have really hurt some people, And it was harmless. But anyway, I guess I'm sure but I don't worry about that. I don't worry about, and I don't worry about making people laugh anymore, as you can see tonight, right? It was kind of, I ask God to write what he wants me to, give me what he wants me to say. Let me go in there, and regardless of what I've worked on, let me be a servant here. And, if I just say what I think God wants me to say, and I get out of the way, then I've done my job. And I hope people laugh, of course, because that's what you get paid to do. But I know even if I just say one thing for that one person that God has in mind, then I've done the job. Yeah.
So, it pertains to like work and stuff. So, how do you show more love towards people, even when you're going through a time of struggle at the same time, and you want to show as much love to people without like, because oftentimes we all go through our life with the struggles in our backlight, and we sometimes treat people with neglect, and so I feel like I want to treat people better, and so I want to know what would be like the best way to treat people better. I mean, I think it was Pastor Brian, no, someone from the church came through the drive-through that I work at and said that you were showing love through Jesus' love, and I was like wondering, is that like the only way to show love? Like, is there more to ways of showing love? Like, because I know that you're like a comedian, and I'm just curious.
Well, I think what I try to do, look, first of all, I just try to be kind and have compassion. And when somebody comes and they get upset, if they're upset with me about something, is to try not to. Brian talks about this, to respond instead of reacting, to not just jump at it, because it doesn't serve the purpose. It doesn't help anybody. And so that's one simple thing to do. But then I also think just doing what you're called to do, when you start to realize, like if somebody's at the drive-through serving, just doing a good job there, because that's where God's put you for this moment, and just doing a wonderful job and trying to put as much energy into that work as possible. God's going to love people through that. And I don't think it necessarily requires any special work. It just requires you to be available to God and do that. Yeah, that's what I try to do, and pray about it. Whenever I go into anywhere, this is something Craig's taught me. Just ask God. Who do you want me to see today? Who do you want me to talk to today? Is there someone in this room? This is what Brian talks about in the first 20 as well. Who do you want who do you put on my mind, Lord, the person you want me to reach out to today? Yeah.
We have a question online.
Ooh, online question.
Oh.
If you could work with any comedian on a project, who would it be? Dream scenario.
Do we have a name?
Spencer.
Okay.
Spencer Boyd?
That's a code name. That's Tina Fey writing in. I think.
Spencer Cortez.
Yeah. That's right. It would probably be, I did get to do some writing for her when she was on Weekend Update, Tina Fey, but I wish I could have done some work on 30 Rock. I love that show. So if Tina Fey had a new project, it would probably be, I'd love to be doing something with her. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Chase?
So what is, or how do I want to phrase this? What's the best random act of kindness you've ever given or received? Just randomly, whether you witnessed it or it happened to you, of just seeing somebody be kind or do something that was nice, whether it was random or planned.
Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind is I was, this is one that I witnessed, but I'll take credit for it. I was supposed to come up here and shoot a video with Craig Horn. And I was in a dark place and I couldn't do it. I said, I can't do comedy today. He said, okay, you know what? I know what's going on. Let's meet for coffee. So we met for coffee at, where's that place we go? Tuscan Cup in Ridgefield. So it's just starting to rain lightly. It's just starting to rain. The road's really slick, and we're sitting outside having coffee, and this car comes wheeling around, some giant SUV, and skidding, and turns over on its side, and crashes into the ditch. And I mean, it was scary. And my man Craig, he just takes off. He's running, and he has flip-flops on. Okay, these are Preacher Man flip-flops. They're like a 50 cents. They're cheap flip-flops. No, look, I'm gonna call like I said. Dude, he goes, so the car it's on its side, it's probably like 8 or 9 feet up, because it's a huge SUV. And he just starts climbing up, and smoke is pouring out. It wasn't on fire, but just, it was so hot. You know, the heat's coming off, the steam's coming off. He hops up there, reaches over. There's a young woman. She's 17 years old in there. And he pulled her up, and that took some work. And he pulls her, takes her out, gets her out of there. And, you know, of course, she's shaken up. But he didn't think twice about it. You know, and he said, call 911. So I finished my bear claw, and made the phone call, and went over there. But that was nuts. I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, okay, great, let's all get away from the truck here now. You know, let's move away. And the firemen showed up. I mean, it was crazy. And this woman, she was shaking, and she looks like my daughter. And I said, where do you go to school? I asked her name. How old are you? I said, do you know Katie Washer? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, that's my daughter. And when she said that, I saw how upset she was. And I just very, very gently and watched for reaction. I just put my arm around her, and she came in, you know, but I was very careful to see how she would receive that, you know. But I think she needed that. She needed somebody who looked like her father just to say, hey, man, it's okay. And I told her the story. I said, listen, when I was your age, I rolled my parents' car. I rolled it all the way over. And you know what? Everything was fine. We got the car fixed. Everybody was, and you know. So that was it. Yeah. That was a pretty good random act of kindness.
Anybody else? All right, one question. Okay, so we are going to wrap it up. We want to thank you, everybody, for coming. We'd like for you to follow us on Walnut Hill Young Adults Instagram and Facebook, and also look for our posts, as we are going to be doing a lot of events throughout the course of the year. And we are going to be doing Bible study Wednesday night. Brian, what time? 6 o'clock Wednesday night? 7 o'clock Wednesday night, Bible study. We're also going to be serving at the food pantry here at Walnut Hill. If you need anything, DM us, contact us, find a young adult member here at the church. And Tim, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate it.